Hello, my name is Carmia Miller, and I'm going to be presenting ancient Egyptian funerary practices. Most people think that the funerary practices that we use now and all over the world are our own, but really they are derived from people like Egyptians who started them long ago. Their three main practices were mummification, burial, and spiritual prayer. Some people spent their entire lives preparing for their burials and preparing for their deaths because that's how important it was to them. For us, depending on our religion, our burial could be the end. But for Egyptians, their burials were the difference between living now and living forever. First, I'm going to start with mummification. Mummification was the first step after death. Mummification was actually a very long process and can take up to 3 months or 90 days. It was extremely expensive, and only those who could afford it had it done. And if you could not afford it, you would be buried as you died. If you could afford it, the first step to mummification would be to take your organs out and put them in glass bottles with a different god on them. The Egyptians had different gods for each organ, as they were the protectors for that specific organ. All of your organs were exhumed except for your heart, because it was believed that in the afterlife your heart would be weighed against the feather to determine whether you could live eternally or be eaten by a demon. These are two pictures of, this one is one of someone who could not afford the mummification process and was buried whole, and this is someone who could. After the organs were removed, the body would be stuffed with paper or some kind of cloth, and then it would be covered in salt for the 90 days so it could be dried out. After being dried out, it would be dug up, wrapped in oils and cloths, and then put in a tomb. Now, mummification didn't just include humans. If someone had requested for their pet to be buried with them, the animal would be killed, mummified, and then buried with that person. Okay, the next step in funerary processes is the prayer. Families would often get a priest to come in after the deceased had been mummified to pray over every body part, so that in the afterlife, the body parts could be reanimated and they could go back to doing what they did in the first life. If you couldn't afford a priest, your family would do their best to pray over you, but the priest had the book of death, so only they knew the exact prayer for reanimation. If someone was cursed during their life and they died because they were a thief or they killed someone, then they would be purposely not reanimated, so they would have to live the rest of their lives as a mummy, or the rest of eternity as a mummy. This would be the weighing of the heart. Which is why they left your heart in your body. The last and one of the most expensive parts of the funerary practices would be burial. Now, most royalty spent their entire lives overlooking the building of their tomb. Many that had money would be buried with all of their belongings and their animals, and they would even be buried with their slaves who were still alive, so that they could have all of this in the afterlife. If you could not afford a tomb, you would be buried in a mass grave, like something like this, and up to about 500 people could be buried in one grave. And if you could afford a tomb, the tombs are always luxurious. This is the outside of a tomb, and this is the inside of a tomb. And your tomb would be filled with everything that you had requested. It would have transportation, food, drinks, and everything that they believed that you would need in the afterlife. If you didn't want your tools in the tomb, they would draw pictures of your tomb. Believe me that the gods will make the pictures real in the afterlife as well. In ancient Egypt, their practices were somewhat complicated, but they were necessary to them. I have explained to you mummification, prayer, and burial. And for the most part, death to them was more than dying. It was something like the beginning of a new life. Thank you.